Today we're going to be looking at our evaporative emission system on a 2007 Buick Lucerne. And so we have the car on a lift here, and this is our charcoal canister that's located at the rear of the car and probably a little bit in front of the fuel tank, I'd say. And you can see here there's 3 locations for 3 different ports. They're all labeled for us. It's hard to see this labeling up here, but it says fuel tank for this one right here, this port, and we have our purge inlet here and our air inlet here. So that's how they're all labeled, and that's how this charcoal canister is set up. And for this tank inlet here, this is direct vapor from the fuel tank into the charcoal canister.
I'm going to show the purge end of the system. Starts here at the canister, going into the purge line. We can see from here it follows along the frame rail, under the body, and will eventually go up into the engine compartment along the firewall. After we enter the engine compartment, we continue to follow it. We hit this bulb. We continue on to our green capped test port, and finally into the purge solenoid connected to the intake manifold. Here we see the canister removed from the bottom of the car is held on with 3 bolts, other than the lines. And here on top is the canister vent solenoid, the port, and here's the solenoid itself. This is a normally open solenoid, allowing the canister to vent unless commanded to close in order to test. We now go into the scan tool and see our 3 functions. We have our EVAP purge solenoid, EVAP vent solenoid, and the EVAP purge seal. We've now entered into the EVAP vent solenoid command center. You can see here on the right we have the option to turn it on and off. So here we've been manipulating a little bit. Currently have it on, and what we're really looking at here is the FTP sensor, the fuel tank pressure sensor. Now that the tank is no longer being vented through this vent solenoid, we notice that our purge solenoid is commanded about 15%. This is causing the engine vacuum to pull in more through the fuel tank, causing a greater vacuum to form in there with no air to replace it. So that's why we see our fuel tank pressure sensor reading in millimeters of mercury and is rising to about 14 or so right here, and continues to rise as the vacuum increases within the tank. See here that we still have it commanded on, yet it's going to switch to actually turn off. Now the solenoid is venting, and we see the drastic pressure drop, actually increase in pressure in the fuel tank, indicated by the fuel tank pressure sensor. Moving on to the purge solenoid command center, we're going to increase the percent command all the way up to 100, and looking closely here at the engine speed, we can see that it is rising to about around the 800 range when it wants to be about 50 RPM slower. We can also look here at the fuel tank pressure sensor, and is rising, so we can assume here that since we have it commanded 100%, our vacuum in the fuel tank stabilizes around 9 millimeters of mercury. So we can assume that that is just what the vent solenoid cannot compensate for with this purge solenoid commanded 100%. Although we do have our engine speed slow back down to what it wants, thinking here that All of the vapors that have been created are mostly into the engine now. The current vaporization is not happening fast enough to make any difference in RPM. Let's look into the system. Here we unplugged the purge solenoid at the intake manifold, and we want to see what it would throw for a code, and we got a P0443 evaporative emission purge solenoid control circuit. So we can see here that it simply notified us that the circuit is inoperable. Concludes our look at the EVAP system on this Buick.